Okay, so let's start at the start with the opening shot of the sign for the diner that the two men are meeting at to discuss a nightmare that one of them has been having. I don't think it is insignificant that both the name and the look of this diner is almost geared towards children. It's the type of place that might have pictures and crayons to color with while families wait for their orders. This again creates an interesting juxtaposition of something kind of corny or middle America, almost condescending, childlike vibe of the diner with something dark and terrifying behind it. Lynch could have easily chosen a more adult diner, a mom and pop place, but he chose this specific look and this specific type of diner. Now, I've got my own theory on why he chose a place like this for this scene. Somewhere that kind of has the feeling of being mass produced, disposable, and even infantile. That's just my opinion. Much of the beauty of Lynch's work is that it is open to interpretation. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions about why he might have chosen a place like this. So let's look at the colors of the sign. It's sort of a pastel red, yellow, and blue, which again is giving this feel of like a Denny's type diner. It's a static shot for the sign, as is common for an establishing shot such as this. Then we go inside the diner. There's a lot of light pouring through the windows.
To Winkies.
There are those kind of large, obnoxious signs in the windows that have special deals for the food there. Brown blinds for the windows. Kind of a kitschy, cheap feel
I had
to
a dream
it.
about this place.
We have soft lighting,
I mean?
which makes sense for both the location they are in
Okay.
and for the
So you had a dream
opening
about this
tone
place.
of the scene. The tension is just starting to build,
Tell me.
so there's not a lot of intensity yet.
Well,
Inside the diner,
it's the second
green
one I've had.
and yellow are
But they're
prominent.
both the same.
We see that with the signs
They
on the
start
wall
out that I'm in
and the
here,
color of the
but
seats in the booth.
It's not day or night.
There's also a good deal of brown
It's kinda half
with
night.
the blinds, the
But
coffee
It looks
cups.
just like this.
So green,
Except
yellow,
for the light.
brown. Just a dash of purple
And I'm scared, like,
with
I
the
can't tell
flowers on the windowsill.
Of all people,
And
you're standing
to
right
speculate
over there.
on why Lynch might have went with those colors,
By that
you know,
counter.
that's
You're in both dreams,
again is up to
and you're scared.
up to up to your
I get
interpretation.
even more frightened when
But
I see
the
how
feeling
afraid
that
you
I
are,
kind of
and
get from it is, you think green, yellow,
then
brown.
I realize what it is.
When you mix those together, what kind of
There's a man
associations do you get? I
in the
get
back of this place.
kind of a seasickness, almost the
He's
color
the one
of
who's doing it.
a sewage plant, brown,
I
yellow,
can see him
green.
through the wall.
So
can see his
I think
face.
Lynch is kind of maybe going for a little bit of a nausea,
I hope that I never see
here,
that face.
and
ever
that
outside
that
a dream.
fits with the guy who's describing his dream, because he seems almost so terrified of this thing that it's making him sick.
That's it.
The camera movement in the diner scene seems to float around subtly
to get rid of
which
this god
I
awful
think helps
feeling.
add to the dreamlike quality. Also fits with the topic of conversation because they're talking about a dream. Lynch uses a lot of medium close-up and over-the-shoulder shots in this scene, and that's pretty typical in a type of stationary two-person conversation that is going on here, but it's also effective and necessary here because the viewer needs to see close up the facial expression and the eyes of the guy talking about his nightmare in order to get a proper sense of just how afraid and terrified he is of this nightmare. When they get up from the table, the shot stays with the table for a few seconds and shows that the guy describing his dream has not touched his breakfast. He's got a full glass of orange juice, coffee, and the full plate of his eggs and bacon and whatever that was. And the guy he was talking to, who seemed incredulous and thought that he's just, he's overreacting about this nightmare. We see that he finished all his food, drank his orange juice and his coffee, and I think that has some significance. I don't think that was unintentional at all, and I will leave that up to you guys to interpret what you think Lynch might have been saying there. They then walk outside, and what is first off noticeable once they're outside is the lighting changes. Now, of course, this makes sense. It's a bright, sunny day, so we got the look of harsh, direct sunlight. But it also makes sense because this far into the scene, the intensity has been ratcheted up. It has been slowly building, and now it's pretty high. And so the hard lighting from the sun fits with the more dramatic and intense part of this scene. When they start walking to the back of the restaurant, we pass a phone booth and also a sign on the back door that says use the front entrance. Again, I think these are intentional. I don't want to speculate on what Lynch might have been saying with that. In terms of the camera movement outside, it's still floating basically the same style that we had in the diner, kind of subtly floating up and down as it follows these guys out to the back. The framing or the shot selection here is interesting. It makes sense. We switch between POV shots and front-facing shots. So, and this makes sense because this is the jump scare. So we need the POV shots because it's a lot scarier when you're in this guy's shoes and you're seeing through his eyes. Just think about it. It's a lot scarier to have something jump out and scare you as opposed to watching a third person being scared, watching somebody else from afar, basically. Now I want to take a second to talk about the jump scare here, which in my opinion is one of the most interesting and effective uses of a jump scare done in, you know, the entirety of the medium. So first off, it doesn't rely entirely on traditional methods to produce a jump scare moment. One of the most common elements that jump scares use is that of surprise. The audience gets caught off guard by a sudden moment. This scene, on the other hand, makes it very clear that something awful might be behind the diner. The viewer expects something, they just don't know what. Also, it's one of the few jump scares that are done in broad daylight. You know, usually it's kind of low key, if not completely dark. When directors will try to get a scare like that, and that makes sense because, you know, people are afraid of the dark. It's scarier when you can't see exactly what's around. The effectiveness of this moment is also contributed to by the mood and the feel set by the larger context of the film. I mean, the whole film puts you in this kind of creepy, dreamy mystery where the viewer is off balance because they never really know what to trust. They never really know exactly what's going on in this strange world. And being off balance makes somebody more vulnerable to a scare. When the man comes out from behind the dumpster, his movement is not natural. It's very kind of smooth and strange and sudden. And I think that creates the feel of something being inhuman. We see this a lot in, you know, a lot of Asian films use strange movement. You think The Ring with the girl coming out of the TV, and, you know, the ghosts who move their limbs back behind their head and walk backwards, that kind of thing. Odd movement is always a little bit off-putting and scary because I think it does make the figures seem more inhuman. And let's get to the good stuff now. The director's voice. Okay, so in terms of Lynch's voice, let us revisit the sign in the beginning of the scene. The name he chose for this diner is Winky's. And yeah, that kind of fits really well with the type of diner this place is, but there are also some connotations in the name. Winky's is, again, childish. It's kind of childish, a name for the male anatomy. It also is a wink. You think about what a wink implies. A wink can imply some kind of hidden message or tacit agreement. You think when somebody's talking to you and they say something and then they wink after they say it, you get the implication. So take that for what you will. The dialogue in this scene contributes significantly to the effectiveness, I believe, as it does throughout the entire film. Lynch's dialogue is oftentimes somewhat vague, uh, loaded with subtext, open to interpretation. Why did this guy want to meet at that specific Winkies? When he describes what he is afraid of, he simply puts it as a man behind the diner, which is very general. It leaves it up to the viewer's imagination to conjure up what's so scary about a man behind a diner that can strike such terror into the heart of this person. It's this sense of kind of a weird existential dread that elevates this scene from just a regular jump scare, I think. The originality of it. This creepy yet dumb looking guy covered in dirt or soot, whatever it is, the odd movements of him, the reactions of the guy who sees it. You know, he has a heart attack and goes unconscious and possibly dies. His brain shuts down because he was so afraid in that moment. So our fear is ratcheted up from our empathy of seeing how scared this guy was. And this is kind of Lynch's bread and butter in a lot of his films. He uses this kind of existential dread, or produces it. In addition to his authenticity and originality he brings to everything he does, that's really something that he draws on a lot for his success. We see it in Fire Walk With Me, with the small man in the red room whose speech is weird and backwards and slowed down and unintelligible, and it just gives this very dark sense of something that's evil and unknowable, that's lurking under this kind of this exterior, this surface that is bright and oftentimes happy. It's like this juxtaposition of bright, happy, good, almost Leave It to Beaver-esque reality. We see that with the detective in Twin Peaks. They're so nice and courteous, and but then they're underneath. It's some terrible things like human trafficking in Twin Peaks, and domestic abuse in Blue Velvet. He plays with that and mixes these two different realities of nice, good with evil, bad, terrifying, and he does that really well. Also, when they're walking behind the diner, they come out to the back, and there's the kind of garbage, the dumpster, and this white stone wall, which is basically being blasted by harsh light from the sun, and it's blocking the sun from the area behind it. So, and this is just my own personal interpretation, but it's kind of saying that this is a guy who almost lives in the shadows, because the wall is blocking the sun, and he's back there in the shadows. And that might have been intentional as well. I can't be sure. But all in all, I think this is just a really interesting and really effective scene that Lynch crafted here. And, that's why he is one of the masters. And I think this is known in the industry as one of the best jump scares around. Lynch also has another one in this movie that's more typical, which is the fast cut to the decomposing corpse in the dark apartment. But this one really stands out just for all the reasons that I mentioned, and yeah, I think it's really interesting, and that is about it.